So, the Canadian Grand Prix, was it a good one or was it a bad one? What do you think? Let's break it down. Max Verstappen, of course, won again, but it wasn't as dominant as some of the more recent wins. Sure, he still won the race by almost 10 seconds, but the Red Bull team said they couldn't quite get the tyres to work on race day, so the gap to the teams wasn't as big as it has been in recent races. I still think Max was probably taking it easy though and had more pace in the bag if he would have needed it. Perez, on the other hand, well, he struggled. We know he started further back because of his terrible qualifying. He started on the hard tyres, and even when he switched to the mediums, he actually complained of grip on both of those tyres. He just wasn't that quick. He fell back behind the Ferraris, who never really caught up to them, and on average, he was 0.7 of a second slower than his teammate, Max Verstappen, who was leading the race. And this is when Perez was in clean air, so not really great for Perez. Back at the front, Alonso and Hamilton had a nice little fight for second place. Hamilton got the much better start and got up to second early on, with Alonso right on his tail. On lap 22 though, Alonso got back past Hamilton down the back straight, and from there he was able to manage a gap. I think the Aston Martin was just a little bit quicker on race pace. Later in the race, Hamilton did appear quicker though, doing fastest lap after fastest lap and closing the gap to Alonso, but he didn't quite have enough, and I think Alonso had some pace in hand, but he was also managing a small brake issue. When the race was finished, Alonso's race engineer thought that without Alonso's brake issue, they could have challenged Max Verstappen for the win. I'm not quite sure about that, because I think Max himself was taking it easy. And apparently earlier on in the race, he'd hit a bird, and the carcass of the bird had actually got stuck in one of the brake ducts. So I think he was managing a bit of an issue most of the race as well. We'll find out, though, in the next race in Austria, whether that Aston Martin has made a leap forward. Sadly for Mercedes, Hamilton was the only one of their cars that was going to finish the race. George Russell making an unforced error into turn 8 and 9 and hitting the wall hard. He punctured his right rear tyre, damaged his front wing, and actually brought out the safety car in the process. He was able to slowly get back to the pits, change tyres, change his front wing, and then get back out, but he later retired due to a brake temperature issue. I get the feeling that Russell was pushing quite hard to stay with Hamilton and Alonso, which perhaps led to his mistake. I need to apologise to Ferrari. Ferrari, I'm sorry that I doubted you. I'm sorry I doubted your strategy. You've got it wrong so many times that when you make a decision that is opposite to all the other cars, I immediately think you got it wrong. When Russell brought out the safety car, pretty much everyone around stopped. There was a few exceptions, Perez being one because he started on the hard tyres, but all the front runners and all the cars behind the Ferraris, they all stopped, put on the hards, and they were hopeful, I suppose, to go to the end of the race. The Ferraris, though, stayed out. They stayed out on the medium tyres. They actually did like 38 laps on those medium tyres. By doing that, they got track position. They got out of a DRS train. And it worked, because most of the other cars had to do a second stop. Ferrari stayed out on the mediums. They put in really, really good pace, got out of that DRS train, and when they then stopped to put on the hard tyres, they stayed where they were. It was actually a really good decision. I doubted it at the time, but it paid off. They eventually finished with Charles Leclerc in 4th, Carlos Sainz in 5th, which from where they started is probably more than what they expected. Ferrari, for once, got it right. So fair play. They made a bold strategy because they would have looked really silly had everyone only stopped once and then they filtered backwards, but they got it right. Fair play. Credit where credit is due. I actually saw Helmut Marko saying that if Ferrari started at the front, they could have challenged them because they have very good pace on both tyres, the mediums and the hards. I suppose we'll never know, but Austria's in 2 weeks, so could be very interesting. Lastly, we need to give a big mention to Alex Albon. That Williams had some big upgrades this weekend, and only on Albon's car. So not only did he have to ensure he kept it out of the wall, as they are very short on parts, but he also managed to achieve a really strong 7th place on pace. Albon is quite often at the front of large DRS trains, and Canada was no different. On very old hard tyres, he made it work for a long time, staying ahead of a large group of cars behind him. He is a huge asset for Williams, and with Sargent going out of the race early, he's likely the only one capable of scoring points for Williams at the minute. And there we have it. An interesting race. The win was pretty much sewn up from the start unless something extraordinary happened to Red Bull and Max Verstappen. But Lewis and Alonso fighting, that was really nice to see. And the Ferrari strategy, I wasn't entirely sure how that was going to pan out. So it was an interesting race, if not like a barn burner of a race. Austria, though, is a very different track to Canada. So I'm really looking forward to that in 2 weeks' time. I'll see you then.